SNHell, a look back at Saturday Night Live with your hosts, Matt and Keith. Brought to you by Lion's Den Audio Theater. Like and subscribe to Lion's Den Audio Theater for more Lion's Den goodness. And here are your hosts, Keith and Matt.
Saturday Night Live, Season 2, Episode 10, originally aired on December 11th, 1976. Happy holidays, everyone. It is another Candice Bergen Christmas episode. My name is Keith, and with me, as always, is my good buddy, Matt. Hello, Matt.
Hello, Keith. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, buddy. We are actually very close to Easter right now in real life, so to do a Christmas episode is not completely out of the realm of possibilities, I suppose. Joining us tonight for her very first time with us, and I'm delighted to have a wonderful performer and playwright named Jen. Hello, Jen.
Hey, Keith. Hey, Matt.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Jen.
Yes, so glad you could do this. So yeah, we've got a new person in the third chair again. This has been quite fun, Matt.
I love the rotating third chair. It's one of my favorite parts.
We're delighted to have you, Jen.
Thanks. I think it's kind of apt, too, because Saturday Night Live has like a different host every week.
Yeah, I actually hadn't thought of that.
Oh, I thought that was the point.
No. Just to get different ideas, because Matt and I can be set in our ways, and to have someone else to call us on our BS or go along with our BS is always lovely.
I imagine I'll do a little of both.
I hope so. First thing I want to talk about is this week, Saturday Night Live lost another alumni. Sadly, Gilbert Gottfried passed away at 67. My first thought was thinking of Gilbert Gottfried for his work on Saturday Night Live is sort of like, you know, thinking about Bryan Cranston for his work on Seinfeld. I mean, he went on to do so much else. Any memories of Gilbert? I don't know how you could be our vintage and not.
First thing that comes to mind for me is obviously the voice acting. Iago the Parrot would be the big one. And otherwise the roast. But to be honest, until I've been reading the articles that have been coming up since he died, I didn't even realize that he was a cast member of Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, same for me. His presence on Saturday Night Live, a giant question mark for me. I mostly know him just as a comedian from his stand-up routines and such. And then, of course, you know, he was in Problem Child 2. I saw a picture of him today with Laraine Newman on the set of Problem Child 2, actually.
And to be perfectly honest, it wasn't a highlight for him either. It was a very tumultuous time on the show, and kind of by many seen as the dark period of the show. Sad to see another one go, especially one that I've gone to know from so much other stuff. Like Jen said, the voice act, and just so many great appearances at roasts and stuff like that. So, Jen, I actually forgot to ask, what's your thoughts and memories of Saturday Night Live? Was it something you watched as a kid, something you get into later?
I got into it probably around, I'm going to say the age of 12. Prior to that, I was into Mad TV, and then South Park came along, and Saturday Night Live used to air right after South Park. And I just was like, oh, hey, it's another sketch comedy show, because, I was 12 at the time. But it quickly surpassed and became like the thing I stayed up late to watch. But yeah, I've been a fan since then. So honestly, I haven't seen a lot of these older ones. Okay. So this was really exciting for me.
Jen, who was your first, quote unquote, your first Weekend Update anchor?
Oh, gosh, it was that guy.
Yeah, Colin Quinn, I think, based on your age and whatnot. You're a few years younger than us. And then you were certainly there for the Tina Fey.
Yeah, Tina Fey and Jimmy Fallon, then Tina Fey and Amy Poehler. Or wait, was it Jimmy Fallon and Amy Poehler?
It was Tina Fey and Amy Poehler, and Jimmy and Tina started together.
Yes. I'm trying to remember what the big news story was, but I remember whatever it was, I only knew about it through Saturday Night Live.
Lewinsky, perhaps?
That's what I was thinking, yeah. It was like that track, so it would have been about 6th grade. Yeah, Monica Lewinsky. I learned a lot about life through Saturday Night Live when I was that young.
Great to have you for this, and hopefully it wasn't too much of a culture shock. It's our Christmas episode. It's also the last episode of 1976, and last year Candice Bergen did the Christmas episode, so it's nice to have her back. But the original plan was actually Truman Capote was scheduled to host. It may have been nice to have Capote there for the sake of like the pop culture completion. It's just way cooler, I think, to have another Candice Bergen episode. Her most recent thing that I could find before this was that she'd actually hosted episode 11 of the first season of The Muppet Show. Big fan of Candice Bergen then. Not then, I wasn't alive then, but big fan of Candice Bergen when I was a kid. Big fan of her now. Thoughts on Candice Bergen?
Love Candice Bergen. I loved Murphy Brown when I was a kid. That was a big hit for me. My mom watched it, therefore I watched it. Great ensemble cast, and really where I got to know Candice Bergen. Not familiar with her dramatic work from the 70s for the most part.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Murphy Brown was probably in syndication. I remember being on a line of shows that I used to watch. And yeah, I loved it. I loved the whole cast. And yeah, I did actually watch some previews of the movies that she had done prior to this. And it's some pretty dramatic 70s stuff that I probably will watch after this is done.
And our musical guest tonight is Frank Zappa, and Matt will be covering Frank Zappa a little bit later. But Matt, how excited were you that Frank Zappa was going to be here without taking into consideration what we did see?
Oh man, with when they announced Candice Bergen and Frank Zappa in the credits of the Jodie Foster episode, I was immediately excited. You know I've been waiting for it. So I came into this pretty hot.
Any thoughts on Zappa, Jen?
Only, I kind of knew the overall of who he was, that he was kind of satirical, kind of wacky. And I remember seeing things, including him, in the past, but not a whole bunch until I watched this. And I really, really, really enjoyed it.
This was probably more Zappa than I've ever consumed at once. So, yeah, we'll get to that, though. The show, we start with the cold open, and it's the Hearst family, Patty Hearst and company, played by Dan Aykroyd, Jane Curtin, Laraine, Newman, and Gilda is actually Patty, and they're playing Scrabble. And they're really happy that Patty is home, but her words in Scrabble are short words like pig and gun. And then she goes on to spell SLA, saying it's slaw, rather than Symbionese Liberation Army. Garrett makes a brief appearance as their butler, Franklin, and Patty wonders if he feels exploited. The family wants to take their mind off all the pressure they've been under and everything that's going on, and they put the TV on, and everything is either based on Patty Hearst's story or is Citizen Kane, which is alleged to be about her grandfather. They finally turn to Saturday Night Live, and Gilda says her favorite part is when they do Live from New York. For me, I know the Patty Hearst story. I'm actually going through Jeffrey Toobin's book again now. A lot of these were insider jokes. If you know the story, they're certainly funny. And my other note on this is I really love the enthusiasm and the excitement Gilda has anytime she's delivered the Live from New York bit.
I noted that she had really good energy, actually, in her Live from New York. It's very childlike how excited she was to say it. I knew the Patty Hearst story, but probably just in broad strokes. So I did think it was really funny. I thought the slaw joke was really funny on its own. I thought specifying it kind of took away from that, but maybe someone up the line felt that was necessary. And I also kind of found that Dan Aykroyd as the father kind of reminded me of Jason Sudeikis.
Yeah, good point, yeah.
I really enjoyed the cold open. I love when they come up with clever ways to deliver the tagline, and I thought this was another clever way. And I really like when they use the cold open for the hot political or the hot current event news at the time, something that they really stuck with later. I don't know if they stick with it as far back as we're going here, but nowadays, the hot political news, the hot news is always in the cold open. It felt familiar, very classic Saturday night for me.
Yeah, agreed. It's off to a good start here. So we go to the monologue, and Candice Bergen doesn't come out when she's announced, very similar to the Buck Henry episode. And Joe Disco goes up on stage and asks Jane to help look for her. He goes backstage, or he goes up towards the set. Jane goes underneath to the backstage. And it turns out Candice Bergen has locked herself in her dressing room because she can't do the show without him. It turns out her heart was broken by none other than John Belushi. Lauren pops by and briefly wonders what the power is Belushi has over women. Jane knocks on the door and tries to get Candice out and says she's not alone. He's like this with all women. Belushi comes in and he's done up to look like Rick Blaine from Casablanca. And this slowly morphs into the final scene from Casablanca with Belushi and Bergen. They make their way to home base, and Garrett has a brief cameo as Sam. I really enjoyed this. This was a good use of everyone. I always want more Garrett, but I thought this was also a very strong opening to the show, and really loved how it wove its way around from basically, Buck Henry to Louise Lasser to Casablanca. This was great.
Yeah, I thought that Curtin was Bergen for a second. On a superficial level, I never realized how alike they look. They both had kind of the feathered blonde hair and the strong bone structure, both very pretty. I thought Jane Curtin was great in this sketch, and I thought her energy was really good, and and her delivery was really funny. I thought the kiss was bad, but the slap was great. The fog, what do you guys think of that fog? Do you think that was an intentional joke or just someone held the button down for too long?
No, I think that was intentional. Just there's so much fog at the end of Casablanca, too, that I think they had fun. Yeah. If they weren't supposed to do it, I'm glad they did.
I thought Bergen's delivery at the end was really good. That you're a filthy liar and you've never told the truth before. Like, I thought that was really, really funny.
I really enjoyed this as well. I appreciate. I always like for the monologue, and it'll become. I don't want to say a gimmick, but there are lots of monologues historically where they do a backstage bit. And I always think it's really cool when you see them running backstage or interacting or trying to get the show on the go. So I thought that was a lot of fun. And I especially liked Jane Curtin's absolute disgust with John Belushi and his power over women.
Yeah, that was really funny.
We then go to a Jimmy Carter sketch, and it's Dan Aykroyd doing his Jimmy Carter, which has, again, gotten better and better. He's talking to the audience, and he realizes that it's going to be very difficult to be president, and he's going to need far more time to keep his campaign promises. This was a really funny bit. It was short. I really like this. This Carter impression is getting better and better. Aykroyd was on point, and the audience was with it the whole way through.
Yeah, Aykroyd is so charming as Carter, with like the way he would speak and then smile and then speak and then smile again. Like, it was really, really cute and really like kind of bashful and energetic.
Definitely my favorite Carter piece from Dan Aykroyd so far. As Jen mentioned, his stop and start with the smile was cracking me up, and I really liked his just absolute dismissal of his promises. Like, that's not going to happen.
We get a chyron.
Whoever that audience member was, she looks like a model. She is beautiful.
Oh, she was beautiful, wasn't she? Yeah. I wondered if she was somebody famous.
Yeah, that's what I assumed too, that it was just someone I didn't recognize.
So we go to a commercial. It's for Santi-Wrap, and it features Dan Aykroyd and Laraine Newman waiting in line to see Santa. When Lorraine's turn comes up, she goes to sit on Santa's lap and puts toilet paper down over Santa to protect her from germ and diseases. Aykroyd tells her about Santi-Wrap, and it's basically a disposable seat cover to use when you're sitting on the lap of a mall Santa. And the great line in there is, he knows when you've been sleeping, but do you know where he's been sleeping? Laraine and Dan and Belushi as a seedy part-time mall Santa were great. I didn't realize this was going to be a commercial. So when it started out, it just seemed like a sketch. And when it morphed into a commercial, it took me off guard. But again, this was another one that worked for me.
Yeah, I laughed so hard as soon as she started putting the tissue down. And I actually have that same line you just quoted in my notes here that was really, really funny. And Aykroyd, again, just full of charisma.
This is like highlight reel SNL for me. Like this Belushi and his ho with the whiskey. That's been on highlight reels for years. I love a good classic Saturday night Christmas sketch. This was definitely one of them. It's on the highlight reels for a reason. Everybody was so good. And I also like that it just kind of turned into a commercial. Caught me off guard too, but certainly in the most pleasant of ways. Very funny stuff.
And I mean, the mall Santa nowadays, I don't think we can appreciate how seedy these mall Santas were. There's things like criminal record checks and stuff nowadays that I don't think they did back then.
Yeah, they'd be very carefully vetted now.
New York City, no less.
That's right. Yeah, it's not all Miracle on 34th. So we now go to the music. It's Frank Zappa. His song is I Am the Slime. It's from 1973's Overnight Sensation, and the album hit 32 on the Billboard 200. Matt's favorite musical performer, so I'm going to let Matt talk a bit about Frank Zappa, and I'm going to sit back and enjoy my drink of water.
Thanks. A couple of things about Frank Zappa. Frank Zappa, the king of Laurel Canyon in California, was born in Baltimore. Grew up there as a lad. He ended up moving to California with his dad because his dad got a job there. His dad was a metallurgist working with chemicals and stuff. So there was always like a lot of gas masks and gas canisters and this weird kind of paraphernalia around his house growing up, which would stick with him thematically for the rest of his life. Self-taught composer. He would, in his youth, without a mustache, play a bicycle on TV. I believe it was on the Steve Allen Show. He was asked to never come back, semi-jokingly, but I think he meant it. So when Frank Zappa gets to California, there's one thing I really want to hit on, because I could talk about this for a long time, but there's one thing I think is really important. He gets out there, he starts writing music, he knows he wants to be a composer. In his youth, he became infatuated with classical music, as well as the R&B and the doo-wop of the time. So now he's out in California. He's a young man, and he's trying to be a composer. He has this little studio called Studio Z. He's approached by an undercover police officer to make music for a stag film. So Frank and a lady go into the studio, and they do like a fake erotic recording. And then when he hands it over to the undercover cop, he's arrested for conspiracy to commit pornography. And he's sentenced. He ends up serving 10 days in jail. Not a long time, but this sticks with this man for the rest of his life. Never again does Frank have a lick of respect for authority and authority figures. And that's going to be really important when we see him on the show again. But it is certainly worth noting that it really shaped his personality and his outlook on life, that happening to him in his youth, because he lost a lot of music. He only got back because of course, the police, of course, ransack the studio. They take a bunch of shit. He doesn't get all of it back, and he is sour. Eventually, he started on the drums, but of course he picks up the guitar. He's asked to join what is essentially a bar band. He is who he is. He ends up taking over and pushing original music. They call themselves the Mothers. They're not allowed to call themselves the Mothers because it implies motherfucker. So they are forced, out of necessity, to become the Mothers of Invention. They go on to become big stars in the 60s. After the height of his career, things dip a bit. In 1971-ish, 2-ish, he's pushed off the stage, breaks some bones. His voice drops like half an octave. He writes a couple of albums in a wheelchair, comes back. Mid-70s are really like Frank Zappa phase 2. He's getting really hot again. And in 1976, he goes to play some shows in New York City, where, of course, he is invited to perform on Saturday Night Live. And at this point in his career, I would argue that this is almost peak Zappa popularity. He's probably got one of his best backing bands, if not the best backing band he'll ever have. He's there to do a bunch of shows. He's going to record them. Things aren't great in his land. He's had a huge fight with his record label, Warner Brothers. They're not releasing his albums. They're editing them without his permission. And again, back to the authority figure thing. This is really pissing him off. But as he shows up here, peak Zappa, mid-70s, best band he's got, I really think Saturday Night Live is the perfect fit for him.
Thank you so much. So I'm the slime, or is it I'm the slime or I am the slime?
I'm the slime.
So the performance tonight, for me, it was very strange. The second that band hit the stage, I was completely enthralled. Lyrically, probably headier than I'd like, but I love the sound and the musicianship so much that I definitely want to listen to more. Maybe I'll throw to Jen, and then Matt, you can talk about this performance itself. Also, too, nice cameo by Don Pardo there as well.
Yeah, was that him doing the voiceover?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, it was so good. It was such a strange thing to do, but that kind of made it perfect. I loved it. Like the amazing instrumental right out of the gate. I thought the xylophone in particular kind of gave it that Christmas feel. The face on the drum thing was really weird, and at first I was like, "What is this?" But I swear I couldn't take my eyes off it for whatever reason. It just kind of made me feel high just watching it. But I really, really enjoyed it. I gave it a perfect 10 it's the perfect thing for like a live show.
Zappa vehemently anti-drug. It's funny that you mentioned it makes you feel high. So he takes the Saturday Night Live band horn section and Don Pardo to his concert that he's doing in New York. This is captured on Zappa in New York, an album that came out in the late 70s, based on these recordings when he was here in New York doing this. Don Pardo has a little bit of a bigger part on the album, and he does do I'm the Slime with him as well on the album. I thought it was a really cool performance. I like when they do interesting stuff for the musical guest. Having his face in the bass drum I thought was really cool. And then when the TV starts oozing slime, I'm like, this is what I paid for. This is why I'm watching cool late night television on a Saturday night. This is exactly what I've been wanting, other than the more white bread performances we've been receiving again and again. The song selection surprised me a little because it's a few years old. But I get, this is Zappa's first appearance on such a national television platform in a very long time. So it makes sense that he wants to sing a song about the poison of TV and corrupting minds. I do really like, if you listen to the album, he doesn't sing the chorus. It's done by backup singers, and it does sound a lot better. Terry Bozzio is the drummer, and he was hammering the shit out of those. I thought that was quite thunderous. I thought the Don Pardo bit was pretty good. I kind of expected it because I was familiar with it from the album. The xylophone player, by the way, is Ruth Underwood. Alex Winter, who is famous, of course, with Keanu Reeves from the Bill and Ted movies, directed the Zappa biography that came out about a year and a half ago. And it was fascinating and interesting. And Ruth Underwood, that xylophone player, absolutely made me cry during the documentary. So fantastic musicians. I mean, Zappa only hires the best musicians. That's what he's looking for. He wants the mothers. Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, it was a party. This is what we came for.
Yeah, I was really pleased with it. Speaking of really pleased with things, we now go to Consumer Probe. And this was written by, a lot of people are credited for this one. Success has many fathers, I suppose. But the ones that I believe 100% wrote this are Ann Beatts and Dan Aykroyd. But regardless, we have Candice Bergen hosting Consumer Probe with her guest Erwin Mainway, played by Dan Aykroyd. And she questions him on his unsafe toys that his company has invented and are marketing to children, including Johnny Switchblade, Bag of Glass, and Teddy Chainsaw Bear. And Mainway spends the whole time trying to justify the reasons to sell and promote these products. He also demonstrates how regular run-of-the-mill toys are unsafe for children. Candice Bergen was great. Aykroyd was great. This is Erwin Mainway's debut. It's a top-tier character that is quintessential Saturday Night Live. It's a great send-up of the ruthless profiteers out there. This is a fantastic sketch. This was fantastic.
I didn't like this one as much as you did. I didn't like it as much as the others. I thought the premise was really, really amusing. And I kind of felt like they were just like, oh, just go out. We're going to send you out with Dan. He's got a great character and a bunch of props, and just roll with it. I did think what was really smart was you could tell Aykroyd was trying to get the angle on the chainsaw, and then he was kind of losing it, like when he first turned it to camera, and then he's shaking the arm to get the light off of it. But I did feel like this was one of those sketches that has a really good premise and setup, but like no real arc to it.
Sure.
This is Dan doing that character again, that character that's all the same character in my mind. And I mentioned earlier about Belushi's Santa being highlight reel SNL. This as well. I remember seeing this as a kid on all the best of clips and packages and things like that. And I do think deservedly so. I thought Aykroyd was terrific. Candice Bergen kind of playing the Jane Curtin role here, which is fine. You know, you're making use of your host. That's great. I do appreciate that. But I thought Dan was terrific. He's in top form, sleazeball. You know, if I'm nitpicking, I think him playing with the regular toys and making them dangerous was pushing it a bit far for me. But I really loved him selling his dangerous ass toys. I really thought it was funny. Classic Saturday night.
Yeah, the justifications for the glass, actually, that did really make me laugh. But I think, the physical humor was a little over the top, trying to make the other one seem dangerous.
So Rolling Stone ranks Erwin Mainway as the fourth best Saturday Night Live character to date, which, I love Erwin Mainway, but does that seem a little high to you folks?
It does seem a little high. But I know this sketch is just historically, it's become immensely popular. Like it's a staple now. When you talk about highlights of the first 5 years, people put this on the list. So I'm not surprised, even though if I sat down and poured over everything, would it be top five? Pretty skeptical. It would be high, but top five does seem a bit tight.
And I also, too, when I think of the Erwin Mainway sketch, I jump immediately to the Halloween one, which comes a little later, and we'll certainly cover that. I still enjoy this immensely. So does Rolling Stone, because they rank it as the 13th best sketch of all time. Again, a little higher than I would like. We now go to an ad. It's for the K-Put Price Gun, and this is re-aired from season 1. I loved it then. I love it again. I'm not always big on the reruns, but this one I enjoyed so much that I didn't hate seeing it again. Jen, you probably hadn't seen that one before. It's the price gun where you can put your own sticker on things.
Yeah, I never saw it. I thought it was really funny. Who was the woman doing it? She wasn't part of the main cast, was she?
No idea. Yeah.
She was fantastic, whoever she was. And yeah, it actually was the first point throughout the whole episode that the time difference struck me, because that's just not how you bring in groceries anymore. With like a price tag, reading off the price tag. I did the conversion rate at the end because they were like, oh, for the low price of $49.95. And like nowadays that seems like a pretty reasonable price, but I'm figuring it was a joke. I looked it up, and by current standards in the US, that would be $220.26.
Ooh, wow.
Nice. So that's kind of makes that joke funnier I was like, I bet that's really funny if I knew what the price meant.
I guess the argument being that it pays for itself in gross.
And just to reiterate, there was a woman who had a price gun who was doing that at the IGA when I was a child. So that also influences my enjoyment. We now go to the Right to Stupidity League. And Gilda plays Lisa and Candice plays Fern. And I think they're roommates. It's implied that way. And Lisa is really dumb. And this sketch is a fairly basic, random sketch until Candice accidentally calls Gilda Fern, which is Candice's character's name. And this is when Candice completely breaks up. Gilda stays in character and adds a few lines in there to make fun of the situation. Bergen laughs through this whole sketch. I'm not usually big on breaking up, but this was great.
I thought it was adorable. Like, I felt that moment when she had said the wrong line and it just like totally upended the whole sketch. Like, I think everyone who acts can kind of relate to that moment. So it definitely gave me a good chuckle. I actually usually enjoy breaking. I find it's very human and I'm there with you. You're doing what I'm doing, sort of like, hey, you're laughing like I'm laughing. But I did find the problem with this was that joke about her telling the joke where she's just laughing. I think that's really funny, but it kind of got lost because I was like, oh, is she breaking too? Now they're both breaking. So that's the problem when laughter is the punchline and everyone's already laughing. But otherwise, I thought it was adorable. It felt like a very real moment.
Definitely. I loved it. This is the third time I'm saying this now. This is a sketch that I just know from best ofs and highlight reels. Like, this is a classic sketch. I thought both of them handled it brilliantly, especially Gilda, who goes on to even crack a joke about it in the midst of her lines. Would it have been as funny otherwise? I don't think so. Not based on, when I think about the jokes they were telling. Might have been fine. It didn't seem like it was running too long. Holy shit. These two ladies made it legendary.
Yeah, if it wasn't for the mess up, I suspect this would have been forgettable filler, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it would have been as funny as written.
So we now jump to Weekend Update, and I don't have a heck of a lot from this one. The first half, we have Jane arguing with Tom Schiller, who's playing her husband, and he's complaining about how much she works. When they realize they're on camera, he ducks and hides under the desk. Couple of sight gags that'll be good for those of you watching the video over on our YouTube feed. Amy Carter's eyes were stapled shut and her hand was epoxy to her mouth. Henry Kissinger does an impression of a Chinese leader, and Jacques Cousteau found 11-inch tall prize fighters. They're all sight-based gags, which I thought were all funny. And then we go to a bit where Dan Aykroyd plays a character named Ray Basalt, who's giving a weather report that's basically a report of like nuclear fallout from various testing sites. That wasn't great. Aykroyd, this is a definite miss for Aykroyd, but he stayed in character and delivered it wonderfully. It just wasn't that funny.
I enjoyed it. I kind of probably liked Aykroyd's thing more than you. I particularly liked the end where he was just like saying everywhere is pretty much a breakout zone. But I had actually just watched Chernobyl last week, so I think that was kind of on my mind. As soon as he started talking about Fallout, I was like, and it kind of gave me a chuckle because of the casual way he was delivering it. Yeah, I thought it was really good, really strong first half.
I agree that Dan's segment was a touch weak, didn't have all the jokes that it probably should have, and he didn't have the his usual high energy, probably on purpose. I trust him. He's a professional. Speaking of professionals, Jane is killing Weekend Update, in my opinion. I enjoy Weekend Update routinely now. Whereas with Chevy, as is documented, it was just slog after slog. She owns her mistakes in the funniest of ways. She's a perfect straight woman. When the jokes tank, she knows they tank. We know she knows. Yeah, I just think she's doing an amazing job.
Couldn't agree more. We go to a commercial now, and it's for the FX70 processed cheese slicer, and it's Bergen and Belushi sitting on a fence. And this is basically a parody of the Polaroid commercials that they did. And when you press the button on top of the Polaroid, a slice of cheese comes out. Yeah, I liked the idea. I liked the sketch, poking fun at Polaroid, which they had to do the commercials last year. And allegedly, Polaroid wasn't very happy about it, but this worked for me.
Yeah, I loved it. Say cheese to get a slice of cheese. Like, it's so simple. I think that just made it funnier. Because I had my conversion calendar open, the conversion rate, The
Awesome.
$69.95 is $308.45 today. But Belushi in the little kid's cowboy suit was probably enough for me. Right out of the gate, they hit it good.
Yeah, this is a good commercial parody. Quick, to the point, funny, silly, but, silly, and they play it straight. I always like when they do that. This was a big hit for me as a commercial parody.
So the second half, the bit I have here is Emily Latella coming out, and it's the first time we've seen Emily in a while. And she does a bit about unisex in lieu of unicef. She runs the normal gamut, but briefer than usual. She then asks Jane why she isn't on anymore, and Jane says because it's not funny. And Emily says she'll do her best, and she turns to Jane and says, bitch. Now, this caused a censor issue where I believe they had to convince the censors that they were using bitch as an adverb rather than a noun. There's a great bit in the Live from New York book. But yeah, this was a strong showing for Emily, and Jane sort of taking the piss out of what she was doing, and even hearing Emily say bitch actually made this relatively enjoyable Emily Latella.
It was cute. Like, I liked that. And it should be funnier thing was pretty good too.
Jane finally taking the piss out of Emily Latella. I popped for that. I thought it was fantastic. Arguably, since the first, the only Emily Latella bit I've really been big on. And was it Gilda that said anybody could read the news? Anybody can read?
Yes, yeah.
She had her own dig at Jane in the previous episode. So this was pretty great.
So we go to our second musical performance, and it's Zappa back with the Mothers playing Purple Lagoon. And Belushi comes out partway through in a suit and a fez with a tenor sax, but it turns out to actually be Samurai Futaba. He makes random noises that the band repeats. This was a fine and fun song. I thought the Belushi part dipped it a lot. Maybe it was a way to personalize it for this particular performance or something, but of the performances we're going to see tonight from Frank Zappa, this was definitely the weakest.
Yeah, well, if I felt high before, I definitely did watching Belushi yell at the band. I thought it was funny though, and I thought it's great the way that Zappa is personalizing this performance to Saturday Night Live.
I did think it was fun when Belushi came out. Purple Lagoon is never a song I would have expected him to play on television. It's musically dense. It's what he calls electric chamber music. So it's some hard shit for the musicians. And yeah, I just thought it was an odd choice for television. But I was fine actually with Belushi coming out and having fun with it. And because, the band still got to show some chops.
All right, now Killer Trees. So it starts with Garrett singing O Tannenbaum. And some Christmas trees are standing behind him, and they slowly sneak up on him. Now, I have no memory of this sketch, ever seeing this before. I must have at some point. So what happens is these trees are sneaking up to kill Garrett. And when they actually stab him, I completely lost my mind laughing. That being said, the sketch goes on. It's Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi. They're playing cops, and Belushi is known as Detective Bouchakis. The trees are basically murderous trees, and they mark themselves down. They're attractive prices to consumers, so they're bought. And we go to an office where Gilda plays a cleaning lady. Tree sneaks up on her after singing a version of O Tannenbaum and kills her. Bergen, then as Gilda's boss, is at the police station, and she has to describe the culprit to Tom Schiller, who is playing a police artist. And he draws a tree. They then go to a lineup where there's a bunch of trees and Frank Zappa there. And she identifies the tree as the culprit and says where she bought it. The cops then ask her to be a decoy for the tree at her home, where she placed a second tree that she purchased. She'll do what she can to spare the lives of innocent Gentiles. She goes home, and the tree sings O Tannenbaum, and then stabs her. This was one of them longer, convoluted bits, but I really enjoyed it. The notion of trees becoming murderous has been replayed by other people many times since. Some sites, just for trivia purposes, say the tree was voiced by Chevy Chase. I disagree with that. I'm pretty sure Neil Levy, who was playing the stagehand, is also the one that voiced the tree. This was good. It's on the weaker end of the night, but I still enjoyed it. And certainly popped when Garrett got stabbed.
I loved this one. I like weird, absurd humor. As soon as he got stabbed, I roared. And I think this is the kind of premise that it's so silly the straighter it's played, the funnier it gets. Zappa in the police lineup with the trees, that also made me laugh out loud. And then just the end, the way the two detectives were like, oh, we said we'd be outside. We didn't say we'd do anything. And then, oh, she looks just like an angel, and now she is one. So another big laugh. So if you get a big laugh beginning, middle, and end, I'm pretty happy with that one.
Great Christmas sketch. I love when SNL, Saturday Night, gets strange, a little bizarre, but they're not afraid to be silly. I really appreciate that. And they obviously weren't afraid to be silly here. Zappa, who would go on to play a drug dealer for an episode of Miami Vice, was in fine form here as a suspect. I liked the branches popping out of the stomachs. I thought the whole thing was great. Pretty ambitious sketch that I really think they pulled off. Yeah,
it was like a whole little mini film. I will say, though, the second point of the night that I realized that I was watching something very old was Radner playing the cleaning lady. So I was like, oh, yeah, this is feeling the time period here, too.
Yeah, very much so. We now go to a Gary Weiss film. And this one covers Diane Nyad, a swimmer who I believe swam around Manhattan, the first woman to do so. And it's some of her students talking about her and her talking about herself. Everything good about the Gary Weiss films wasn't there. I mean, it's a nice little bio. To me, it just struck me as like an interlude you'd see about being physically active or something on TV. This didn't fit at all for me.
Yeah, I was so confused by it. I just kept watching it, waiting for the punchline. I thought maybe this athletic stats that she was quoting were subhuman, and I just didn't know enough to understand the joke. And then it's showing her student, and I'm like, oh, I think that student has a black eye. Maybe the joke is that she beats her students. They were saying how strong she is, but it was just a shadow on her face. And I was like, I don't get it. I don't get what the joke is.
Maybe Matt saw something we didn't.
I didn't. No. I like Gary Weiss's slice of life New York late 70s movies, but usually, he's talking to some very strange characters in the city. This just seemed to be a regular ass person with a sports bio. I didn't get it. I don't know why it was on the episode. Yeah, I was baffled by its presence.
So getting back to the show, we're going to adopt a Belushi, and Candice says everyone is going back home. Dan to Canada. Jane is going to be staying in New York with her husband. And Garrett, she assumes, is going back to Africa. Incidentally, he's from Louisiana. But Belushi has nowhere to go, so some family out there can adopt Belushi for Christmas. Belushi makes some very odd off-color remarks about his plans for Christmas. They're very creepy and inappropriate. But this was funny. Mild thumbs up from me on this one.
Yeah, that joke at the beginning, I was like, is it satire? That's the thing when you watch this old stuff. I'm like, is it old-timey racism or is it satire? Like,
definitely satire. Candice Bergen wouldn't have gone the other way. And,
I don't think so either.
Yeah, no, not.
And just the way she said, I guess, it just the way she kind of threw it away like that. But yeah, I liked it. Belushi was funny. It was really offensive, which I find funny sometimes.
Glad to hear it. Yeah.
Belushi's really on this episode. It's like everything he does, he hasn't had like tons to do, but he's really killing everything he does. And, obviously Candice's line about Garrett was the laugh of the sketch. They're really using her well, I also think, as a host. They're not wasting her like, oh, so it was supposed to be somebody else, so we have nothing for you to do. She's out there consistently. Yeah, like I said, I've been impressed with Belushi this episode, and this segment was no exception.
She makes this joke about Garrett going back to Africa, which by today's standards would be seen as extremely offensive and wouldn't get played. Is the racial issue, and this is, three white people talking, is the racial issue that line, or is the racial issue that when they needed a butler, they got Garrett? I'm more bothered by the racist stuff when Garrett is playing butlers and bellhops more so than a line like that.
Yeah, definitely. They don't use him for much. Aside from that, he was a crooner, he was a waiter in this episode, and I can't remember what else. But yeah, I agree. And I think the joke in that line is supposed to be that she assumed that, which obviously but
there you go.
Yeah. So I think that's more a bad reflection on her, but I do agree that today that wouldn't have made it to air.
We now go to something else that might not make air these days, even though it's quite possibly the greatest thing I've seen in a while. Let's Kill Gary Gilmore for Christmas. It's a happy and joyous Christmas song about executing Gary Gilmore at Christmas time. And it's the 6 cast members standing in Christmas sweaters as snow falls on them about their desire to execute Gary Gilmore. The rolling audience reaction, which sort of started as a, uh-oh, should I laugh at this, to let's burst out laughing, was awesome. Dan and Gilda, well, they all were, but Dan and Gilda in particular were just completely covered in this fake falling snow. This was absolutely awesome. I thoroughly enjoyed this, and I liked the song, and I liked the performance of the song. And incidentally, Gary Gilmore did make it through Christmas 1976.
Yeah, it really made me laugh too. We have like the lyrics placed against the familiar music and the Christmas sweaters and the big smiles and stuff. Like it worked really, really well.
Not the first time we'll see the cast singing a bit of a Christmas jingle on stage. It'll happen later to great effect. I thought this was pretty good. I was unfamiliar with the case, but it's obviously pretty dark, and it's late in the show. It's late on a Saturday night, so this is when you go for that. I couldn't help but think, it's 1976. I hope that fake snow is not filled with asbestos or something.
Oh, God, you're probably right. It's made of asbestos.
And now we go to Peaches and Regalia. It's the third performance from Frank Zappa. This was originally released in, I believe, 1969. Hot Rats was the album. This was the best of the night of the three Zappa performances for me. I loved the glass/crystal violin coming out. The drumming was fantastic. This was a really, really, really fun song. I thoroughly enjoyed this and have played it many times since.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. Mad props to the drummer. I mean, he was great all night, but in this song, it was really, really his moment to shine, and he did a really, really great job.
Terry Bozzio on the drums. He does some lead vocals on some Zappa albums as well, like Punky's Whips. And he goes on to form a new wave band, Missing Persons, actually, who they were a one-hit wonder in the early 80s after he was in Zappa's band. Peaches and Regalia is something the SNL band has played themselves, going in and out of commercial. So it's not the first time we've heard this piece of music on the show. I loved it. This Peaches is one of Zappa's signature tunes, if you will. So it was nice that he got to play a hit after the very complicated Purple Lagoon. This was a crowd pleaser.
And now we go to the Good Nights. It seems like they cut back earlier because you can hear crew chatting and some other people chatting. And they're outside on the Rockefeller Center skating rink. It's the whole cast and a big chunk of the crew. They're all dressed in Victorian clothes and they're skating. Bergen has a long time to kill. She's very awkward about it. But this is a very nice, kind of sweet Christmassy ending that I didn't find gaggy at all. What I did notice is how easy it is to spot the Canadians and the Minnesotans on that ice. Laraine and Aykroyd were quite good, but the Brian Boitano Award for excellence in skating goes to Tom Davis, who was whipping around everyone. And Bergen was pretty good for a Californian. You know, I enjoyed this ending. I watched it a few times to get to recognize who everyone was, because some were wearing wigs and they were all wearing big old clothes, but a lot of fun.
I loved it. The skating looked like just good Christmas fun, and Bergen was so endearing in her just like saying like, "What, you're making me do this?" And she's like, "Oh, then come down and say hi and help me kill time." Like, it was so sweet. I
agree. Nice, pleasant, and I thought it was cool that they were out on the ice in front of Rockefeller Center. Special ending for a special Christmas episode. Very apropos. It was a little clunky with her buying time, but geez, Candice Bergen is so charming and natural. Like she pulled it off. And, you know, a lesser host just wouldn't have. It would have been super weird. They obviously trusted her to do it.
A few little notes I noted is, other than who was excellent at skating, I noticed Belushi threw himself over the boards at one point. Michael O'Donoghue looked like Bambi on ice, really struggling to, but they were all helping each other through. It was really nice and sweet, actually. Let's get to our thoughts on the episode. So the host, I'm doing the epilogue and the ratings together now. For me, Candice Bergen was great here. She maybe veered too much into presenter at different points, but was absolutely excellent in everything she did. She's someone like Elliot Gould, who really blends in and jumps in feet first. We go to see them over the years where certain people are, you know, because of their talent or their personality or their background, far more like first among equals than they are stars of the show. And Candice Bergen will be back, but we won't see her again until 1987.
I thought she was very charming. I think the cast liked her too, and I think that showed in the final product.
perfect use of a host, in my opinion. She killed it. She came off natural. I thought she was great in everything she was in. And she just, she has that charisma, as I've said, to go out there and just be trusted to go pull something off. This is my favorite Candice Bergen episode that we've seen so far. Absolutely. I thought she was wonderful.
The music, I'm not, I haven't been pining for the edgy as much as Matt has, but this was a definite change that worked really well. My only minor question about the whole thing is why at Christmas would you pull out Frank Zappa rather than something typically more Christmassy? However, it worked in this episode really well. I really would have enjoyed this anywhere, and I look forward to a further appearance by Zappa. This is great music, and it makes me think of like really cool horror movies and really neat pop culture-y stuff from the 60s and 70s that sort of stood the test of time. So this gets a thumbs up from me. And Frank Zappa will return to actually host the show not too far down the line.
Yeah, I think he was a perfect fit. It was fun. It was lively. There was like kind of a little bit of humor about it, but it was still all so like meticulously done and like so strongly performed. No
surprise to the thousands. My favorite rock and roll performer of all time. I thought he got to show off his whimsy, his humor, as well as the fact that his music is really hard and complicated. You know how much I bitch about there being 3 musical performances, but Belushi out there hamming it up during the Purple Lagoon. I was glad that Frank, and then Don Pardo on the first one. So it was really nice to hear Peaches with just Zappa and the band without any outside influence. I could go on. This was obviously a huge hit for me. This is what I've been waiting for from Saturday Night Live. Frank Zappa is such a perfect fit for the show. I think his music is a perfect fit for the show. And it's just so nice to not have the musical guest be so fucking boring.
Yeah, this was not white bread, Matt. Even if I didn't know you were a Zappa fan, I would definitely think this is what you were waiting for.
100%.
So here we go to the fun stuff. What was your worst bit of the night?
I'm going to say the film. I was just so confused watching it.
Easily the film, the Gary Weiss film, did not belong on this episode. Should never have made it to any Saturday night episode. Do not understand the decision-making process behind this.
3 for 3. Have no idea why it was there. At times I've seen why, some Gary Weiss stuff that was funny that didn't work. This was not that. This worked, but it's not supposed to be here. What was your best sketch of the night?
Killer Trees.
I could have predicted that one, I think, even before we talked about it. Yeah.
My favorite sketch of the night was Candice and Gilda and their stupid bit. It was, it didn't go as planned, but the professionalism of the two of them out there riffing off each other, Candice just cracking up uncontrollably. She does her best to try to keep it down. Gilda just eggs her on even further. This was Saturday night magic. You can't write that shit. It was really, really good.
Yeah, and I mean, call me Johnny Predictable, but I went with the Irwin Mainway consumer probe. And that was a tough call. I mean, that's a iconic sketch. And that wasn't a runaway for me. There was so much good tonight from the beginning to the end, except the movie. Everything was on fire tonight. So I did go with Consumer Probe. So who was your star of the night?
I gave it to Aykroyd. I felt that he was the lead in a lot of sketches and that he never dropped the ball once. I thought overall everybody was so strong that it was a really hard decision to make. So it just came down to screen time.
This may surprise you, Keith. It may surprise the thousands. My star of the night, I don't know if it's the first time, but it's Mr. Belushi. I thought he was amazing in everything he was in. I thought he really showed some great chops, some great timing. I just thought this was such wise use of him. I really enjoyed everything he did on this episode, which is not common for me.
This was the first time you've picked Belushi. Yes, I've picked him before. Third Chair's picked him before, but this was your first time. So yeah. They were all in contention tonight, but I did go with Aykroyd for much the same reasons Jen did. The thing he did about the nuclear radiation didn't land for me, but it wasn't him as much as the writing, and the audience just wasn't buying it. It could have gone Gilda, it could have gone Belushi, it could have gone Jane, but it wound up landing with Aykroyd. So overall, this was a completely awesome job. The worst bit of the night was the Gary Weiss film, but taking that out of there, it's a real showcase of what the show could be, what the show has been at different times, but they've been able to sort of maintain it for the full 90 minutes. If half the sketches that appeared on this episode appeared on any other episode, they would have been our favorites, and it'd be head and shoulders above a lot of the other stuff that we've seen so far. The sketches were really tight, and even the longest one, which I think was the trees, carried through perfectly. The music from Zappa was a welcome change. And the best thing about a Christmas episode is it's not inundating you with Christmas. Saturday Night Live will have Christmas episodes that are virtually no Christmas and some that are all Christmas. This was the perfect balance. To be perfectly honest, it's my favorite episode thus far. Pretty much a masterpiece for me, and I gave it a 9 out of 10, which I haven't given anything yet.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, and I'm glad to hear it because I always think I'm not critical enough. So at the end, I'm like, I'm giving this a 9 out of 10, but I hope that's not just me being a person who tends to like everything. So I'm glad it was a strong episode because I don't have much of a point of reference prior at this point. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I wonder about that film if they just had it and for whatever reason were contracted to use it. So they were like, we'll put it here because this is a really strong episode, so it's not going to hurt it too much. Yeah, but overall, the cast was tight. The host was great. The music was highly entertaining. Like, I can't really fault it much just for that. I was really, really happy with it.
Great use of the host, as I say again, as a broken record. Fantastic music. Everybody into what they're doing. Clever and ambitious premises. Edgy when it needs to be edgy. Christmassy when it needs to be Christmassy without shoving it down your throat. A near perfect episode, 3 for 3. I would give this a 9 out of 10.
So that's 3 9s. Gives it an average of 9. The Internet Movie Database gives this one an 8. So for the second time in our run, we're actually higher. This was ranked as the #1 episode of the year as of November 2021. And the 34th episode to date. Some high praise from us and the Internet Movie Database as well.
This is the best episode of Saturday Night that we have watched so far, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Because even the strengths of the Desi episode, which is now #2, there was a nostalgia factor and there was just Desi, kicking ass on the music. But this was a strong episode, very much in a ensemble way too. So, Jen, it was an absolute joy having you here, and hopefully we can have you back for maybe a more typical episode down the line, one that's not just completely awesome all the time.
Yeah, I would love to. This has been a blast. Thanks so much for asking me to do it.
So awesome work.
Well, that's what I'm here for.
So, Matt, we're going to be back in about a week with Ralph Nader and George Benson, and it's the first episode of 1977. How do those names work for you?
They make me curious. I'm not, I wouldn't say optimistic, that's the wrong word, but certainly curious to see how everything goes.
And maybe this will boost your optimism, but there are 2 major players, 2 huge additions joining Saturday Night Live for that episode that will become very much a part of the lore, and also some familiar characters will be joining us for the first time as well. So we'll be back in about a week, but until then, we'll be celebrating Christmas at Easter here in SNHell.